Eager to strike.
Hello everyone, I am Michael Huber from Easy Allies, joined by Tim Campbell, Game Director of Stormgate. For those who have no idea what Stormgate is, give them the quick pitch.
So Stormgate is our brand new RTS, our real-time strategy game that really blends the classic RTS gameplay that you may have known and loved from a bunch of big franchises. But we've taken this sort of ideal gameplay and we're bringing it up to modern standards. So we're building it with a lot of different modes. So no matter whether you're a casual player or a competitive player, you can play it. We're making the game so it can be socially enjoyed with you and your friends together. And all of the goodness that you would expect from a real-time strategy game, like building bases and harvesting resources and controlling all your troops on the battlefield, all of those can be done here in this game. And so we're really excited about it, and thank you for talking with me about it today.
Yeah. When you talk about, all players of all skill levels are able to play and different modes, can you go into that a little bit? Because traditionally, RTSs can be pretty intimidating, pretty daunting, but, from what I've played of Stormgate, it's immediately accessible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the intimidation level of the genre is probably the first people think about when you say RTS games. You think, oh my goodness, that's not for me.
Time to sweat.
Oh my goodness, that reminds me of when my hands were shaking after that one game that I played. And it almost seems like work, right?
Yeah.
But at the core of it, there is something incredibly compelling about RTS gameplay. It challenges you mentally, it challenges you physically, it opens up the door for so many ways to express your skill in the game. And it's something that we love. And so when we started out building Stormgate, we asked ourselves, how can we take what we love about this genre and really just kind of broaden the amount and type of people who could come in and enjoy it, right? And we almost wanted to fight back against the perception of the genre as a whole, right? There's obviously a huge 1v1 and competitive segment to the audience, right? Like players they think of RTS and they think of like, this is where I get to play competitively to express my skill, to become a master. I can show there's no team involved here, right? It is just me. This is
like
how
chess.
Yeah, this is almost like an Olympic sport where I get to excel at this. And that is true, and that's awesome, and that's something to be respected, but that's not the only way to play RTS. Mm-hmm. There are equally groups of players who want to play and enjoy a good story. People who want to play with their friends. People who want to just relax and get creative with an editor and play some goofball mode that is something that lets them de-stress at the end of a long work day or whatever it is. And so we really want Stormgate to meet all those needs and really be the RTS that brings people into the genre no matter what type of game player they are.
Yeah, it seems really hard to get that balance down. Like, does that because obviously, the balance changes once players get in there and, as time goes on. But for like the initial phases of balance, what's like the ultimate goal there? Do you guys like pick favorites that, maybe you get a little extra love to, or is that just a constant conversation? What's that process like?
It's incredibly multifaceted, and you're right to home in on that. It's because probably the most complex aspect of RTS development, the biggest kind of problem set that we have to overcome. And there's kind of two different answers for it. On one hand, we're effectively making multiple games within one game, right? We have to competitively balance the game for a 1v1 experience so that no matter what faction you're playing or what your skill level, you can have an even playing field and you can come away from it feeling like whether you won or lost, it was a fair game. It was a fair match, right?
Losing is a pleasure.
But we also have a cooperative game where our objective is to kind of pull out all the stops and let you feel like this overpowered character who's leading this army against all these crazy enemies, and you're working with your buddies to overcome really tough challenges. And how you do that is by progressing and becoming more powerful, having over-the-top capabilities, right? Which often are kind of polar opposites with a level playing field where everything is really balanced and whole. And then you have the people who just want to play and experience the story, right? And there's a different pacing that has to support the narrative, which is not just you're overpowered, because that wouldn't make for a very compelling narrative, right?
Yeah.
And so we have like these different sub games that we're making at the same time, and that really influences how we design the game and how we build it. And then you add on to that the second challenge that I was mentioning earlier, which is we're developing the game. When we start off, we don't have all the factions built. We don't have all the units built. We don't have all the systems in place. And so initially, at least, balance is not actually our objective. What we do is we try to separate the concepts of tuning and balancing. And tuning is how can we make the game satisfying? Any bit of the game, whether it's a unit or placing a structure or how you chop a tree down or whatever that experience is, how do we make that feel good to you as a player? And that's tuning. And that might be, to get this to feel good, it does a lot of damage, or it shoots really far, really fast, right? And so we tune to get those things to feel right and resonate. And then as we get the mode and these multiple factions in there, then we start looking at, all right, how do we take all these fun things that we built in isolation and how do we get them to hang together cohesively and achieve the goals of balance, right? And that is something also that we have to train ourselves as developers. Balance is not an end goal. There's not going to be a day where we say, all right, we have achieved the perfection of game harmony. Design balance, perfect harmony, and pencils down, let's walk role play, right? Like, balance is a journey. And as we add new commanders, new heroes, new factions, new abilities to the game, inevitably ripples play out through everything. And so with a live game where we're constantly building it and adding to it, balancing is a never-ending process. And so that's something where we kind of do this dance of, like, when we bring new things into the game, we tune it to be satisfying, and then we have to weave it into this overall balance that we're trying to maintain. It's a tough thing to achieve.
I love that. Tuning versus balance, I think, is really interesting. I love hero units from Warcraft 3. That was like one of my favorite things ever. Hero units are a big part of this game, obviously in 3v3s. Can you just tell us a little bit about the origins and just kind of the overall vibe for the hero units?
Yeah, absolutely. Hero units, I love hero units too.
Yeah, I love it so much.
I'm coming from the same place. RTSs at kind of their most fundamental level are about armies clashing against each other, but it's hard to root for a faceless army. And I love to root for the leaders, the generals, the heroes, the villains, the people who, like, narratively will be leading these forces on the journey that they're going on through the story. And I'm excited with our cooperative mode, where players are going to be able to collect these heroes and then play them in the game and see them in the game. These same heroes are featured in the campaign as well too. So you will be able to play them just for fun and co-op, but you can also play them to experience their story arcs in the campaign missions. And that is super exciting to me, because each of these is really a different way of looking at the core faction. Each hero is not necessarily a pure good guy or a pure bad guy. They represent sub-factions and have different agendas, and some of them are rivals, even within the same faction. And getting a chance to explore all of those dynamics and betrayals and power rivalries and things like this, and then see that reflected in the game experience, is super compelling. Beyond the story level, each of the heroes represents a twist to the faction as well too. So they will add special new units in. They might lose some units. They might change the core underlying foundations. Like maybe a Vanguard hero might change how veterancy works, or it might lose the ability to build Atlas mechs and instead does something else, right? And so as you play the game and you try these different heroes, you will find that they really reinvigorate the core faction in a lot of different ways. And you might find one that really speaks to you, right? And then that's the one that you kind of perfect your mastery of, or whatever, or just enjoy trying all of them.
Yeah. Were heroes ever discussed for 1v1s, or like what was that conversation like?
Yeah, very very much so. One of the things that I love about Frost Giant is that we have a lot of passionate developers. And so with any topic that is in any way controversial, we have the full range of perspectives very passionately represented in our design discussions, right? And Heroes in 1v1 is a great example of that, right? There definitely have been a lot of voices saying, hey, you know what? Heroes are great. They're in all these other modes. Why not put them in 1v1, right? And why not just make that more uniform? And then there's other people who say, well, you know what? I look at 1v1 as my way to compete with people. And I don't want a bunch of random stuff or a bunch of poorly tuned things that are just newly added to the game to impact my 1v1 experience. And so when working through any design topic like this, we take our time and we discuss it and make sure that we're approaching it the right way. And I think for 1v1 in particular, we really want to respect the traditions and the norms of this genre that have come before. There are a lot of ways that we are trying to make our 1v1 feel fresh and exciting, a lot of new ideas at play. But putting heroes in 1v1 and then having those heroes dramatically change things opens up the door to some things which I think changes 1v1 from maybe where it traditionally is at the core of this, at the core of the competitive side of this genre. And so we really wanted to kind of put a force field around that and protect competitive play and make that its own thing. And then similarly look at the other modes and how can we make them as great as possible within their space. And so that may mean fundamentally different rules for co-op than it does for 1v1, and we're okay accepting that, even though there's more of a development tax there to support these differences.
Were there always going to be 3 factions for the purported launch, or the 1.0, if you will?
That is a very loaded question, one that might get me into a little trouble. Gerald's going to come tackling me from off screen
factions,
here.
bro!
No! So, yes, we've had lots of discussions about what's the right number of factions, right? Warcraft 3 had 4, you have StarCraft 2 with 3, there's other games like Age of Empires that have tons, right? And so, like with any design topic, there's lots of passionate people fighting for each one. We're just going to have to see what happens. 3, I think, felt right to us at the start. That's what we're focusing on. With the introduction of the Celestials, it really is changing the mix in a lot of interesting ways, which is our goal. And so we'll see if there's anything beyond that or not. But what we've seen with the introduction of the Infernals earlier, and then now with the Celestials, is the game takes on a much deeper richness and a much greater range of possibilities in gameplay with each additional faction that we've added. And so that's something that really excites us and we love seeing play out.
Yeah, they're so different. We had the chance to play as the Celestials, and it was a little bit of a learning curve, but they just already felt so different.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That was our goal. So with the Celestials, it's challenging to build a race from scratch and to do it in the context of a game that already exists with 2 factions, right?
Do you have to stop yourself from doing certain mechanics with one because maybe the other ones are familiar?
Absolutely. We find ourselves doing that all the time. This sort of mechanic, actually, we have a great idea here, but you know what? Let's not act on it. Let's kind of put it in the hopper and wait on it, because that design space is something that we're wanting to preserve for this faction over here. And so we definitely go through that process and find ourselves doing that pretty regularly. With the 3rd faction, though, our goal right at the start was to not pull any punches. With Celestials, we really wanted to push ourselves into some new design spaces. And at least with our initial version of Frigate, we actually said, let's put aside the accessibility part of it, right? Like, let's accept a bit of a learning curve right here and not pull our punches, right? Because there's a lot of, when you're talking about new ideas, there's a lot of tug and kind of push-pull with them about how much is too much. How much change will alienate people or make the game hard to play versus how little of change is going to feel uninspiring or unoriginal, right? And so there is this spectrum that we constantly are kind of subjectively navigating, right? And I would say that our goal is never to hit it perfectly originally. Like Blizzard never hits it perfectly originally. That's why iteration is so key to Blizzard's success and why their dev times are as long as they are, so the team can cycle to really hone in and refine that over time. That's what we're doing too, as we're going into early access. the game is not done. We're not shipping the game and it's complete, pencils down, move on to something else. Early access is the start of a period where we are actively still developing the game in conjunction with the community and with the feedback from the community. And so our first goal for the Celestials was, let's do something new, right? And that brings all the baggage with it of it might be challenging or complex or hard to play. And we can always refine those rough edges. We can always polish it off or pull back if we need to. But let's start by doing something bold and trying something new.
It's bold. I was like, what is going on? I have no, gatherers. What is happening?
Yeah.
I loved it.
So one of the things that we observe about the genre is that there are a lot of traditional approaches to certain things, whether it's how you train your troops or how you place your buildings or how you harvest resources. And there's always a little bit of difference. Usually it works in, but generally they kind of play within a tight box, right?
Yeah.
A tight design space. And we wanted to kind of push on those and say, what happens if we actually color outside the lines here, right? Is that good or is that bad? Either way, let's be fearless enough to try it, right? And to see what works and doesn't work. And so our goal was to not sit in paper design land and kind of conceptualize until we came up with the perfect model and then execute that. What we want to do is say, all right, we have some pretty cool ideas. Let's throw it in there. Let's hammer on the game. Let the game speak to us. Mm-hmm. And by playing it, we're going to identify what really resonates and what doesn't. And then we can edit and refine and polish from there.
Speaking about accessibility, I haven't had the chance to use it, but the helper bot. The helper bot can queue up different units for you and maybe expand for you. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this is a feature that I am super excited about.
Yeah.
And we haven't really talked publicly about it yet. And we're just starting to roll it out, right? But there's kind of a couple of things I want to say about this. But first off, this is something that came just grassroots from an engineer's mind on this project as we were developing. And they just said, you know what? This is an interesting idea. Let me try it out. And it captured the team's imagination. Wow. And we love it. One of the most challenging things for us is how do we help new players play the game easier without taking something away from the skilled player, right? We don't want to narrow the gap between the skill floor and the skill ceiling so that we lose that kind of player journey of gaining mastery. Mm-hmm. But we do want to help new players in, right? But if we just make something happen for new players, skilled players are going to gain that also. So it doesn't really help, if that makes sense. So what this helper bot does is you could think of it almost like it's Archon mode with you and a computer player. Mm-hmm. And Archon mode is like this tandem player where two people are playing the same force. Yeah. And the helper bot lets you do everything. You are playing the game legitimately, but the helper bot steps in sometimes when maybe you might be struggling, when maybe your resources are accumulating too much, you're floating too many of one resource or another, you're not expanding, maybe you're sitting at supply cap for a long time. And what the helper bot does is it kind of comes in around what you're doing, and it'll actually have a worker go and build the building or go harvest the resources or go take an expansion for you. And they don't lead the way, so they're not giving you an advantage over other players, but they will help you avoid some of the struggles maybe that newer players have when they're playing the game and they don't really understand the mechanics or they haven't developed the muscle memory that people who play RTS all the time have. And so in my experience, this really, really helps new players step into the game, but it doesn't really give them a competitive advantage. It just improves their experience when they're playing the game. And that is so cool. Huge distinction that really matters to us.
Yeah. So what modes will the helper bot be available in? So campaign and 3-on-3 and 1v1 even? Or?
Yeah, great question. And helper bots this is a feature that we're really excited about, but we're also wanting to get community feedback on, right? So right now we're focused on just getting it out there so we can try it out, people can see what they like or don't like about it, and then we can figure out the next steps. So, but from my perspective, the best thing about this feature is that it can help new players have a less sucky time when they're playing the game, if that makes sense, right? Like it helps really shave off the rough edges of things that might be holding them back or confusing to them. It's not going to be something that helps you gain a huge competitive advantage or jump higher up the ladder if you're going to do something like that. And so we're testing this out in cooperative play right now, and we'll see what's next.
That's so cool. That's so exciting. What is the next step for Stormgate as we continue on this closed beta path?
Well, right now, Stormgate's in our frigate release, which means that we are getting feedback on the Celestials. What's next up for us is our early access release. This is our Griffin milestone. We go alphabetically through unit names from this genre that we know and love. So the next one is Griffin. And with early access, really, it's our next step of developing the game, right? It's now going to be playable by everyone out there. It's going to be something that you can just go to Steam and get the game and try it out. It is actively 100% in development. So you're going to see a lot of things change as we move through it. But it is the natural evolution, the next step for us of just bringing everybody in. This is a really community-centered project. We have been working really hard along the way to get feedback from players, to incorporate into the design of the games, to respond to everything from bug fixes to I don't like this to I have concerns about this. And our dev team is so focused on building a great game for players of all skill level that we really have to put the game out there in an unrestricted way like this through early access in order to get all of the voices heard. And this is what's going to help us go from early access to our official 1.0 launch, is by working all of this feedback into the game, refining, polishing, iterating, building on what is fun for players, and then making it as great as possible.
Tim, seriously, thank you so much for having us here. Stormgate's coming out on Steam in early access, free to play, August 13th. Cannot wait.
Thank you so much for having me here. Please check out the game. Looking forward to seeing everybody in it.
Seize the initiative. On to victory. Zalu Bewa.